Welcome, and I'm so honored that you're joining me today on Reclaim Your Life event. I'm Mal Duane, the host and the producer of this show. I'm a recovery coach and a transformational guide, helping women reclaim their lives and discover their authentic voice. This is the third season of Reclaim Your Life, featuring leading visionaries and heart-centered women whose passion through their work is to serve others and share their gifts to make the universe a better place. Each guest will share how they've transcended extraordinary challenges, loss, and in some cases, trauma to become the women that they are today. And we have an amazing guest today. Are you ready to take your journey of deep, emotional, spiritual awakening and inner transformation so that you can finally kick the self-doubt, self-criticism, self-sabotage, and shame to the curb and fully embrace your authentic feminine presence, power, purpose, and peace? Catherine Ewing, founder of Helping Women Heal, is a spiritual coach, healer, mentor, and teacher for women who are ready to do just that. Integrating years of experience as a psychotherapist, energy healer, ordained minister, purpose and passion coach, an EFT practitioner, with her own journey of leaving her job and her 30-year marriage and opening a healing center all within a 6-month period, Catherine will take you from feeling lost to loving life, from shame to shining, and from powerless to purposeful. An expert in identifying and helping clients release the subconscious and energetic patterns that keep them stuck, Catherine is passionate about supporting every woman to live her soul's highest calling. That's my kind of girl. Catherine, thank you so much for being here today. This is an honor. You know I love your work, your energy, and what you're doing.
Thank you. It's an honor for me to be here. You know, when you started to ask the question, I was like, yes. And then I realized you were reading my bio.
Yes, I want to do that.
I want to do that.
Yeah,
I know. Do that.
We all want to do that, Catherine.
We all want to do it.
Yeah.
And, you know, on some level, we all, I don't want to say need, but you know, sometimes people hear the word trauma and they're like, well, I haven't really had any trauma, but we don't have to have trauma with a capital T. Mm-hmm. Life is full of traumatic experiences, you know, where people raise their voice and as a child, we get scared and we don't know what that is, and that energy gets stuck in us. These are the little things that happen repeatedly over time that can impact us in the same way that a big trauma does.
You said something very interesting to me one day in a conversation. You said, I knew when I was very, 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 very little, maybe 5 years old, that I wanted to teach and serve. I wanted to help women. I knew I had a purpose, and I just thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
So give us a little light on that journey from that 5-year-old to where we are today. What inspired you?
Well, you know, it's funny. I was having a very similar conversation just before I came here with some folks who own a training center, and I'm going to be partnering with them to do some workshop and things. But, you know, I was saying so I grew up Catholic, first of all. So my first recollection of sort of injustice was that girls couldn't become priests, right? So I remember, you know, sort of standing up and in front of, you know, the nuns, the teachers, the authority figures, saying this isn't fair. Girls should be able to serve in the same way that boys could. And then girls couldn't even be altar servers. It was just altar boys. Mm-hmm. And so from a very young age, I had a sense of injustice, and particularly how that played out in terms of gender, you know, with girls and women. I remember as an elementary school student, I would sneak into the adult section and I would hide in the stacks of the library reading biographies and autobiographies of women who had broken the mold, right? Whether it was Joan of Arc or my namesake, St. Catherine of Siena, or Amelia Earhart, or Harriet Tubman, like these women who just challenged the social and cultural mores and customs of the time and really went on to do things that no one thought was possible. So from the very early days, I sort of had that those yearnings in me. And, I went on to be one of the first women to have a women's studies minor as an undergraduate and then as a graduate student. And I've just always been drawn to women's transformation, justice, healing. I've always loved to put puzzles together. So what I do now, I was talking to someone this morning about being a spiritual archaeologist. When I studied sociology, I was fascinated with archaeology. And it turns out that's what I do. I take women on the most important journey that they'll ever take, right, is their soul's journey. And we gently and lovingly dig up and uncover those artifacts from their past that could be the things that are holding them back, but are also the things that are the treasures, right? The seeds of who they really are and what they came here to do. So I get to put puzzles together because I help people put those pieces together. And I get to be an archaeologist because I get to dig, right, into that rich past and find those pieces that tell the story of who this woman really is and what her treasure is, right? And and I'm an ordained minister, so I get to minister, just not in the Catholic Church, but in my own way. I'm a minister of spiritual peacemaking, and I work primarily with women. So I love to see how all these threads come together, and then also help other women to see how the threads of their story come together to really speak to who they are at their essential being, not the stories, not the history, not the experiences, not the trauma. When all of that falls away, who did they come here to be? What was their soul's joy and excitement in coming into physical form? And how did everything in their life up until this point enrich the soil of that? So,
beautiful. Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
The soul's journey. So what happened in your life that gave you the wisdom that has enriched that soil for you, that makes you do what you do today, besides all the formal education?
Right, the formal training, the education, the blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Right. The alphabet soup after the name.
Yep.
So the two things, Mal, that really, actually there are three things, but two of them I kind of lump together, so that I feel like are really significant parts of my story, are that I lost both of my parents when I was fairly young, not a child, but I was 22 when my mom passed away suddenly and unexpectedly. I was in my final week of college, and on the day that I was to graduate, we buried my mom. And I was getting married 2 months later. So there was this obviously major loss in my life at a time that should have been joyful and celebratory. And it's almost to me like I went through that period of time in a blur, So there was the loss of my mom, and I come from a large Irish Catholic family, and my mom, as many moms are, I believe, was like the hub, the center of the wheel, right? So when she passed, it felt like my whole family system just blew apart. Siblings moved away. My dad struggled badly and actually began drinking more than he had been. And he married very quickly, because I don't think men of that generation who have been married for that long were very good at living alone. And he married a woman who was not really emotionally healthy, had her own issues. She committed suicide. She hung herself on their 3rd anniversary. My father had decided he needed to move out, and he had gone looking for apartments. And when he came home and opened the garage door, she literally was there. So again, that wasn't specifically my experience, but another sort of traumatic experience of loss. And then my dad passed away a few years after that, when I was pregnant with my first child. So neither of my parents were around, to welcome and be around any of my children. So that, that's another loss in and of itself. I also have a brother who passed recently, who struggled with mental illness his whole life. And so living with someone who was, described with bipolar disorder or schizophrenia and, all of that, that it's just another piece of my personal story that makes me particularly tuned in and conscious of issues that families go through when someone they love suffers with mental illness. And so there's more pieces, I guess, than I thought. The other really big part for me was my decision 7 years ago to leave my marriage of 30 years. And not only did I leave my marriage, but I knew that two things. Because it was my decision, I wasn't comfortable asking my then husband to leave the house. I felt like it was my decision. I needed to take responsibility for that. And so I knew that if I left, I couldn't afford to take the kids with me. And so I left my our 3 children, with their dad. And they were 14, 16, and 21 at the time. So I had just left my paid employment to open a holistic healing center. So I was on my own financially. I left a 30-year marriage. I lived in somebody's basement for 15 months while I sort of got my feet back under me. And here I am 7 years later. So I've walked the walk that I know many women have walked, and many other women are not walking because of the fear associated with leaving what's comfortable, leaving what's familiar, becoming financially responsible for themselves, having to, for me, break the hearts of my children. And I knew I needed to do it. Yeah. I knew on a soul level that I needed to do it. And not many people would understand it, because I did not have a bad marriage. There wasn't abuse. There wasn't alcoholism. There wasn't gambling. There wasn't womanizing. There wasn't any of that. There was just a growing apart where who I was not honored and recognized in a way that felt congruent for me. I don't know if that makes sense to everybody, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
No, I think it makes complete sense. You didn't feel inspired, supported, nurtured, cared for in a way that lit you up and kept you moving forward. There was something missing, something big.
Yeah. And well, there's a point, I think, when you're on a spiritual path, I know, there comes a point when you no longer define yourself by what you do. I'm a Reiki master. Okay, I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm the other thing. Or I do those things. At a certain point, I realized I am that. Like, that is my essential nature, a healer, a voice for God, if you will, a spiritual teacher. And the hardest part for me in my marriage, so my former husband and I are both from the New York, New Jersey area, where sarcasm reigns supreme. And, I can be as sarcastic as the next person, but I've grown out of it a little bit. But he has stayed sort of in that sarcastic mode. And he would poke fun at me with the kids. Oh, there goes mom doing her woo-woo stuff again. And one day he said that, and I thought, I can't be here anymore. Like, even if he thinks it's funny, even if he thinks it's a joke, the fact that he was involving the kids in poking fun at who I was at my most essential nature was just something I couldn't live with anymore.
And what's absolutely wonderful, Catherine, is that you recognize that you weren't being valued at your core and appreciated for where you were at that core, at that soul level.
Yeah.
And you made a conscious choice.
And it wasn't overnight. I mean,
No.
I sort of started getting those stirrings right around the time I turned 40. And I think a lot of women have this experience. I now call it divine discontent. But back then, I just called it generalized anxiety because I'm a therapist, right? So, but I recognized there was something stirring in me. It didn't always feel good, but there was a part of me that knew it was okay. Like I didn't need to be overly concerned about it. But it was this process of my soul growing and, sort of wanting to express itself differently. And that was the journey, right, that I talked about, where we started going in different directions. And I can't speak for his experience, but my perception of it is that sort of as I was opening up and wanting to broaden my awareness of spirit and universal principles and my connection with God and Source, he was shutting down. There were certain life experiences that were shutting him down. So it wasn't just that I was moving in my direction. He was also kind of moving, or he wasn't standing still. He was moving in a different direction. And after a while, that divine discontent or general anxiety felt like suffocation. I felt like there was somebody had a vice, a grip on my heart, and I was having trouble breathing, and I felt heavy, and my body, everything about me was letting me know that it wasn't okay. But I stayed until I got a really, really clear message that it was time to go, because I didn't want to act impulsively, and it saddened me. This was the man I loved. I thought I was going to spend my life with him. And like I said, there was no real reason. I almost wished he'd do something terrible and then I would have a reason, but he didn't.
Right.
He just was being himself. But when my youngest child, my daughter, and I'll say manifested because she is a manifester, going away to boarding school, which was never in the plan, but it clearly was in her soul's plan, and she made it happen, and she got financial aid. We literally dropped her off one weekend, and I think it was on the way home in the car, or maybe after I got home in meditation, I sort of heard Spirit say, "We've just opened the door for you. Are you going to walk through, or are you going to shrink back?" Oh, crap. I guess it's that time.
Yeah, this is it.
Literally, I was gone about 2 weeks later. I moved out. And I took my dresser, her old single bed, and my clothing, really, and I walked away from 30 years of marriage, 25 years of owning a home and all of that stuff, and literally took what was most essential: a bed, a dresser, my clothes, and some personal items. And I didn't want to start stripping down the house. I want this. First, I didn't have room. I was in somebody's basement, for heaven's sakes. But both energetically, I wanted to break, and I didn't want to, again, disrupt my kids' lives by starting to discuss or, I want that piece of furniture or whatever. It just wasn't important to me.
So Catherine today is a very fulfilled, authentic woman, living her passion and her purpose. What inspired you to become an ordained minister?
Oh, that's another good story. But I want to say something about what you just said. Passion. I am passionate and I am on purpose. And sometimes it doesn't feel completely fulfilling. Like all the pieces aren't there for me yet. I would love to bring my beloved partner into my life, right? I would love to find that, and it's coming. I know it's coming. But that financial abundance, like, the whole package isn't here yet, and I know that it's coming. I know I keep putting one foot in front of the other. I know that I have to walk my talk so that I can ask my clients to do the same thing, not turn their lives upside down necessarily the way I did, but tune in, listen in. What's their guidance telling them? How can they begin to move more in the direction and take risks and step out of their comfort zones? And I can be in integrity and, as you said, authenticity in inviting them to do that because I've done it myself, right? The ordained ministry is very, very interesting. So this is another one of those pieces that goes way back. When I was in 7th grade, I was introduced to Franciscan friars, right? The Order of St. Francis of Assisi. And I loved those guys.
I do too.
I started carrying the prayer of St. Francis, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there's injury, pardon. I started carrying that around with me as a girl, which is, I find, a little bit unusual. And I've always been interested in empowerment of women, of course, and justice and peace, right? Those are sort of things that have always been important to me. And so back in 2003, I already had a master's degree, and I had this urge to be doing something more. And I started looking around for a program. I thought it was going to be a doctoral program that would just be an umbrella where I could kind of put all the pieces together that I wanted for me, but somebody would sign off on it and say yes. So one day I was on my computer, still living at home with my kids and my family, and this email came through from James Twineman. And he had just come back from Bosnia, where he had his experience with the emissaries of light, which you can read that book if you're interested. And I was reading his email, and he was describing his experiences a little bit. And he said, I've been guided to start a seminary program, and these are the elements of it. It's going to be based on the peace prayers of all the major spiritual traditions. It's going to be based on the works of St. Francis of Assisi, because Jimmy was a Franciscan brother at one point. It's going to be based on the works of St. Francis of Assisi, and it's going to have an element of bringing in the energy of the divine feminine on the planet so that we can balance this masculine energy that has been prevalent for so long and brought us almost to the point of destruction. And we were going to be studying Jesus, or I call Yeshua, and Magdalene as partners, as beloved partners and master teachers and representatives of the divine masculine and the divine feminine on the planet, and how these two balance each other. Mal, I'm reading that email and I can feel it again. My whole body was vibrating and I had tears pouring down my face, which was not a common experience for me back then. As and I said, oh, maybe this is the program I've been looking for. And I remember Jimmy said, if you're interested, put yes in the reply box. And I put yes, 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 yes. And I sent it back to him. And a couple of months later, entered the Seminary of Spiritual Peacemaking. And, did a 2-year program, some virtual, some in person. I got to go to Israel and be ordained there at the Sea of Galilee. And did a full immersion baptism, in the River Jordan, and work with the Jerusalem peacemakers. And it was a remarkable experience. So that was, and so I don't practice ministry in a traditional sense. I don't have a church or a congregation. I believe my work is my ministry. And I do speak at churches here and there, but not as a minister in that sense.
I know you'll marry somebody here and there if they ask you to.
Oh, yes, I will.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of the fun things. I don't really advertise that, but every once in a while, someone who knows me says, oh, well, I think I told you the story on the week of New Year's Eve. I got a call or a text. Actually, it started as a text from a former client who said, could you marry, my fiance and I on New Year's Eve? It was like 3 days away. I was like, sure, let's do that. So we did this outdoor wedding at a park here under a tree that they had carved their initials in a few years back. And it was really such a joy for me to be able to share in that celebration, because when she was my client, she was going through the end of her then marriage and struggling and trying to make some decisions about moving back to California, where she was from. And she ended up staying here in Connecticut and eventually meeting someone and falling in love. And he already had a family. So she got to be a mom, which she hadn't done, and she's a natural mom. You know, she's a teacher and a nurturer. So she sort of got a built-in family and her partner all in one, and it was such a delight to be able to join them in that sacred moment.
Catherine, how do you inspire women to get in touch with what's in their soul? Is there a simple answer to that?
Yes and no. I mean, it's simple in the sense that the information is always there and available to us, not always so simple about gaining access to it. You know, it was one of the things that I call them my rants with God for years. How come I can't hear anything? How come I can't see anything? I have all these friends who are psychic and clairvoyant, and, you know, they're seeing all. And so I think it is different for everyone. But one of the things that I love to do, as you know, is emotional freedom technique. And I find, you know, a lot of people use tapping for a lot of different things. Because I'm a healer, because my intention is to go deep with my clients, I often find that tapping on whatever is happening in their life right now is the wave that we follow, where those patterns that I talked about before, the puzzle pieces, the archaeology, those are where all the messages of the soul start to show themselves and, you know, let themselves be known. And because I'm a certified, it's called passion test facilitator, right? So, you know, there is a process, and I've done purpose coach working and dream coach working as well. So there are lots of questions and lots of processes that I can take clients through. Oftentimes we'll start with EFT because they come in with a presenting problem, and then as things unfold, I can invite them to answer these questions or look at this a different way. Or we might do a meditation where we bring in the higher self to bring some information forth. So there's so many different ways. And, you know, one of the other things, when I first started college, I was going to be a resource librarian or a librarian. And there's a part of me that still loves to do that. I love, read this book, check out this website, talk to this person, go to this meeting. You know, I'm always, try these essential oils. Have you checked out these flower essences? You know, do you know what the astrology is for today? Like, I'm always bringing in different resources for people. So, you know, sometimes I'll suggest a flower essence whose single purpose is to help someone get in touch with their higher calling. So it's all different, you know, and that's what I love about it. It's just this integrated, wonderful mishmash of modalities that I get to play in and be very intuitive about how I work with each person.
Well, as we wrap up, in your toolbox, you have a free gift for our audience, something wonderful that you've created. Could you describe that to us?
Well, in all honesty, I haven't created it yet.
But you know what it is.
Because, as you know, I'm going through some rebranding, so I want to put something together really fabulous. In the past, I've offered some other free gifts, and yeah, it's going to be a combination, and it's going to be great. But I can't tell you right now exactly what it is. It's one of those mysteries to be.
Well, when this goes live, it will be there.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's what I mean. It will be there.
Live,
Yes,
it will. But because we're taping a little bit in advance, it's still formulating itself in my consciousness.
Okay, that's all right, because I know going to be good.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
just love your energy. I love what you do. So real. And I've done a session with you, with your EFT, and I know how powerful it is and how liberating it is. And if you're in a place of pain or suffering or doubt or fear, it just lifts that. It takes it away. It was just exquisite. So I want to thank you so much for this program.
Well, as I said, I'm honored and I'm blessed, and any opportunity, I feel like I want to stand on the tallest mountain, you know. Well, maybe not the one that Kevin and Tommy climbed at Yosemite.
Right.
Were you
Yeah.
following that? I'm not going to stand on top of that one, but and just share this message of deep emotional healing, spiritual awakening, and profound inner transformation, because the healing piece has got to be there. Otherwise, it's like slapping coats of paint on a moldy wall. It looks good for a while, but it'll start to unravel again. So the healing piece is so, so, so important, and I'm so happy to share it.
So much. You have a beautiful day.
Thank you.